MAGA firebrand Steve Bannon says that he wants Senator Lindsey Graham, a Republican, in jail.
NewsNation's Chris Cuomo and Bannon were discussing Graham's recent visit to Ukraine with Senator Richard Blumenthal. Ukraine launched a massive attack on Russia this week, destroying 40 aircraft after the two senators' visit.
Bannon accused Graham of stirring the pot in Ukraine. Let's watch.
Two things ought to happen. Either cancel his passport and don't let him back in the country, or put him in jail if he comes back. Lindsey Graham is stirring it up right now. And people better wake up to the fact that we're getting sucked into this war. And if we get sucked in much more, it's going to be tough.
I'm just saying you can't be throwing people in jail because you don't like what they say. That's my only point. I'm not saying that you're wrong about where this might lead and how dangerous it is. And that's why I wanted you on to discuss it.
Russia had launched its largest drone attack of the war before Ukraine's most recent strike. Representatives from both sides met for another round of peace talks, and they did agree to swap dead and injured troops, but not much else. Now, multiple outlets are reporting that Russia launched an attack on civilians, that killed 3 and injured 20.
Senator Blumenthal wrote on X, quote, Putin is intensifying his reign of terror through bombing civilians, kidnapping children, and mobilizing troops, despite Ukraine's astonishingly effective drone attack on 5 Russian bases. Ukraine shows amazing guts, ingenuity, daring, and bold drone attacks across Russia. Putin has underestimated Ukrainian resolve and ability from the beginning. So have many of our own leaders.
Well, look, I don't think Lindsey Graham should be in jail. That's
for
a
saying
bit
his thoughts. Yeah.
Well, it's not just for saying his thoughts. He's a important leader of our country. He's a prominent senator. He's not a private citizen just expressing his views. He is there as part of the alliance with Ukraine, and he is someone who is constantly advocating for, not just advocating as a private citizen, but as a member of the government, for greater military intervention all across the world. He wants World War III with Iran. He wants to give Ukraine everything they want to continue this war with Russia. That is not where the rest of the GOP is. Frankly, I don't think it's where most of the American people are. I think we all recognize that that it is very unfortunate Ukraine was invaded by Russia. It's a terrible thing that happened. Putin is responsible. Ukraine is well within its rights to continue defending its territory and to attack Russia, in my view, as they're being attacked. Now, that goal of that, however, should be to get a more favorable bargaining position for the peace deal, because this is only going to end with a peace agreement. It's not going to end with Ukraine defeating Russia and evicting them from the country. That is a fantasy. It is a fantasy that Lindsey Graham is playing into.
I had low expectations for the peace talks in the beginning because I think what Russia has shown is that they're not trying to really come to the table with any real thoughtful negotiations. They want a list of demands met, and that's it. And so I don't think that at the same time they're spending 2 hours on the phone with President Trump to discuss solutions and then bombing Ukraine the next day or within a week, that Ukraine, who is the victim here, not the aggressor, should not defend themselves and do things back. I don't think
they should.
And I think that Lindsey Graham is probably just pushing forward the idea that, we should help them create a stalemate, not to win the war, a stalemate to make Russia actually really negotiate. I think keeping 20% of Ukraine, keeping Crimea, these are all things that Europe and the European Union do not want to see happen. And Europe, we have allies there. So we should think about the betterment of the entire world and what position they'll be in if Russia does this again or continues thinking they can do anything that they want. What message are we sending to the entire world that dictators can do anything and we just stand by? After we supported Ukraine for so long, we can see it through and at least help them get to a stalemate by just releasing the funds that were already approved for them when Biden was in office.
I've said this before when we discussed this issue. I think they're in the best situation they could possibly be in right now. If we'd had peace sooner, maybe they would have retained more of the country. I don't see any scenario where this war comes to an end and all of Ukraine remains in Ukrainian hands. I think the territories that Russia conquered, they are not giving back, no way, no how. There's no way to convince them to do that, and we don't have the military might or the will to eject them from the country. Europe doesn't have the will to do that either, and it's their backyard. If they thought it was so existential, you say, well, what's next? Who's going to get attacked next? If Germany feels that way, if France feels that way, if Britain feels that way, they could send in troops. They could actually have World War III over this. They're not going to do that because they don't think it's worth it. They don't think that this goes beyond Ukraine. They're not convinced of it. They're not even convinced of it enough to stop taking Russian energy. They're still engaged in commerce with Russia. So to my mind, that means this is a dispute between two countries that, again, is bad, and Ukraine is the victims here, and we have supported them, which was very kind of us. I would say we supported them without any thought-out plan for how this is going to benefit them. Frankly, our feeling was we'd like to make Russia kind of suffer or have some difficulty because they did this, so we're willing to throw as many Ukrainian lives into the meat grinder as necessary for as long as possible. I'm not sure that's a very humane attitude to have, so I am substantially with Steve Bannon here in saying, let's bring this to an end. No more money for Ukraine, no more arms. There aren't even going to be soldiers to use the weapons anymore.
I think we're overestimating the effect that this is, or underestimating the effect that this is having on Russia. Russia is also spending a ton of money and doesn't want to continue to be in this war, and actually thought that it would be done by now, right? Thought they would get what they want and move forward. So the fact that we're here this much later from the start date shows us that Ukraine has held its own and there has been a sort of a stalemate. And so just coming from a president that on the campaign trail said more than 50 times, President Trump, that he was going to stop this in 24 hours, even if it was an exaggeration, it seems like the great negotiator, the people voted in office because he had this great negotiating ability, is unable to do anything like he promised. And so that is what American people should be looking at and wondering, well, what's the plan now? The plan can't be, well, it's both of their fault, it's not my issue, because that's what he's saying now. He's kind of making Ukraine look like they have some kind of part in playing of this aggression that happened to them, which they don't. And he's kind of blaming both sides and saying this, I don't know why we jumped into it. That's not a leadership solution from the world power.
I mean, if you want to talk about blame, there is some blame to go around, including on the U.S. side. The way we dangled NATO membership for Ukraine, we had to commit to either strategy. We could have been very clear that Ukraine does not meet the criteria for NATO. It is not brought down as political corruption to a sufficient level. It should not be in NATO. We could have made that clear, and that might have mollified Russia. Or we could have actually just admitted them to NATO, and then Russia can't attack them, or else
then we would have been in a war. So is that better to you?
Either way would have been better than saying, we might want to have them join NATO, but we're not going to do it, we don't know, and it created ambiguity for Russia. We just got to be clear. For deterrence, for nuclear deterrence with powers, you have to be very clear about what happens if X, Y, Z things take place. By leaving them in this limbo middle ground, we spooked Russia, we made them want to intervene, and we didn't actually give them a reason not to intervene because the country wasn't in NATO. So I think we picked the worst of all middle ground courses.
But now that we're here, because I do agree that that was not the best tactic to dangle NATO over Ukraine. But I do think that now that we're here, what's the solution? Like, we only could be forward thinking. We can't reverse time and figure out what Biden could have done differently. And a lot of times we hear coming from Trump, what has Biden done? He blames a lot of things on Biden, everything on Biden, even the recent unfortunate attack that happened in Boulder. He's talking about Biden. It's like, okay, but you are the president.
Yeah.
At some point, you have to come up with ideas.
That wasn't Biden's fault,
solution.
but this was Biden's fault, and the best way forward is a deal that nobody's going to like on our side, for sure. But I don't know what else we can possibly
do. A deal that makes at least one concession, at least one. Mm-hmm. Jasmine Crockett is vowing to at least launch an impeachment inquiry into Trump if given the oversight gavel. That's next.